Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. I'm so sorry I missed last week, so I didn't really like to tell you I was going to be missing it. I just sort of didn't put a video up. But you guys didn't seem to mind too much, so thank you for not hating me. I just wanted a holiday, wanted like a week off, you know? Today's mystery is a very interesting one. I've really enjoyed researching this. This is going to be the case of the Isdal woman, which is one you may or may not have heard of before. I think it's a crazy interesting case. I hadn't heard much about it before I started researching it, but I feel like it's one of those ones that people should know about because it's really interesting. So on the 29th of November 1970, a man and his two daughters are hiking in Mount Ulriken in Norway, in an area that's known as the Isdal Valley, or it's even sometimes known as the Death Valley. And shockingly, whilst in Death Valley, he comes across the body of a woman. Now, this body wasn't a regular dead body. I'm going to insert a picture of it now, so if you don't want to see a dead body, then look away. It's not really that clear, but I'm going to put it in now. Her body was found in the rocks, and her front was completely charred and burnt, and she was found in a position called the boxer's stance, which from what I can gather is a stance that a lot of people take whilst being burnt. Her arms are sort of like this, and around her were a load of items, and these items didn't look like they'd just been thrown or dropped in a panic. They looked like they had been placed specially and sort of ceremonially, you could say. Now I'm going to read from my notebook here and tell you the items that were found around her body or near her body. So there were a dozen pink sleeping pills, which was from a brand called Fenimal. There was a packed lunch, a watch, an empty quart bottle of St Halvard's liquor, two plastic bottles that smelled very strongly of petrol, a silver spoon with the monogram filed off, and a burned passport. Anything that would have hinted at her identity or who she was removed. None of her clothes had labels in, the monogram was filed off the spoon, even her face had been burned to a point where she was pretty much unrecognisable. Oh, and very strangely, her fingerprints had been sanded off. The autopsy confirmed that she had died from fentanyl overdose and carbon monoxide poisoning. She had very distinctive teeth, and her teeth were actually in a very bad way. She had 14 fillings, and she had several gold crowns as well. I'm going to insert a picture here of her jaw so you can sort of see it. Her teeth were just in a very bad way, and it was very unusual for her age range as well. The police sort of managed to place her age between anywhere from 25 to 40, and for somebody that young it's quite unlikely that they would have such bad teeth, but she did. And the dental work that she had done on her teeth was not something that was commonly done in Norway, so it's pretty obvious from the get-go that this woman wasn't from Norway. She was probably from somewhere, I think the police first thought she was probably from Europe, Central Europe. They even went as far to say South Africa or maybe even Central America. As of today, the day I'm filming this, which is actually the 29th of November 2017, she has been unidentified for 46 years, 11 months and 30 days. She was about 5'4". She had long brown black hair, I'm guessing a sort of similar colour to mine. She had a small round face and very small ears. And that's all they could really pick up from the burnt remains of her face. I'm going to put in a sort of composite sketch of what they think she looked like here. The first composite sketch that was ever released of her is actually very creepy and very weird. I don't know how they could even like release it as like, do you recognise this woman? So I'll insert that one here, and then I'll insert the more up-to-date, better one here. And here's where things get a little bit weird. If you're a true crime nut like myself, you're probably going to draw a few parallels here with another case I covered a few months ago, a case that's called Tamam Shud, or the case of the Somerton man. I will link it up here so you can go watch it if you want to. But this links to that case because the police actually found two suitcases belonging to this woman at a local train station. The police thought this was going to be their big break in the case. These two cases that belonged to this woman were surely going to tell them her identity. They managed to link this case to the woman by fingerprints found on the prescription glasses that were found in one of the cases. However, I've just realised her fingerprints were sanded off, so how did they have her fingerprints? I didn't think about that when I was researching it, but that's also a very weird point here. In the case were just the usual sort of items that you would expect to have in a suitcase. There were clothes, there were several wigs, which is very strange. A lot of people said this was just a fashion at the time for women to wear wigs, but it could also be somebody trying to hide their identity. There was German, Norwegian, Belgian and British money all found in the case. Oh, and Swiss money as well. There was a comb and a hairbrush, cosmetics, there were teaspoons, again with the monograms filed off. There was a tube of Eczema Cream, and the police thought this would sort of lead them to her because usually on prescription cream there is a name and address, but this had been peeled away, so there was no name or address on this tube. Same with all the clothes, again, all of the labels had been cut out. The police went to huge extremes to be able to find out anything they could about these items in the case that could lead them to the identity of this woman. They would contact department stores in Paris, France, with pictures of the cosmetics, see if they recognised the packaging. They were looking at the fibres in the clothes to see if they could link it to anywhere particular in Europe. And they could also link it to the woman because there was threads, like repair thread, found in the case that was used to repair the clothes that the woman was wearing at the time she died. There were a couple of important pieces of evidence they did find in the case, however. One of these was an Italian photographer's sort of business card, and they managed to track down this photographer pretty easily. He said that he'd met this woman and taken her to dinner. And very, very strangely, although obviously when you go out for dinner you're out for quite a while, all he was able to find out about her, or all he was willing to tell the police anyway, was that she said she had come from a town just north of Johannesburg in South Africa, and she had 6 months to see the most beautiful sights in Norway, and that's all this woman told him. I'm sure she probably did also tell him a name at the time as well, but the name that she told him is probably a lie and not relevant for reasons we will approach in a little bit. Another important piece of evidence was a plastic bag found in the case from a shoe shop in a town called Stavanger, not sure how you'd say that with a Norwegian accent, sorry, called Oscar Rovit's Footwear store. Of course, the police went to the footwear store and they spoke to the owner's son, Rolf, and Rolf actually remembered the woman. He said that she had come into the store and took an abnormally long time trying to choose the shoes that she was going to buy, and he said that she was very distinctive in the way she looked, and she also smelled very strongly, and he later said that she smelled of garlic. Now, from what I've been able to research, garlic was actually not a very common cuisine in Norway at the time, so he probably wouldn't have immediately picked up on the smell of garlic. I've also read a couple of sources that said because of the condition of her teeth, it's very likely she just had very, very bad breath. Rolf said she was a very well-dressed woman, she was nice looking, so I'm guessing she was a very beautiful woman, and she had long dark hair, and this all matched up to what they knew about the Isdal woman. He also said that this beautiful dark-haired woman had ended up buying a pair of rubber boots, and the Isdal woman was found wearing a pair of rubber boots when her body was found. And from this, the police were actually able to trace her, and they traced her to a nearby hotel called the St. Svithen, sorry, Norwegian, hotel, where she had checked in under the name Fenella Lorch. And of course, again, they thought, this is their big break. She's Fenella Lorch, we identified her. Turns out that wasn't her real name. This woman had been checking into multiple hotels across Norway, all using different identities, different names, different towns of origin. A lot of hotels in Norway at the time required people to show their passports before they checked in. So it's quite obvious that this woman had multiple fake passports, and all of the names she used were fakes. And I'm going to read to you all of the different aliases she used whilst checking into these hotels across Norway. The first one was Genevieve Lancier. She said she was from Louvain. She checked into the Viking Hotel in Oslo from the 21st to the 24th of March 1970. Next up, it was Claudia Tilt from Brussels. She checked into Hotel Bristol in Bergen the 24th to 25th of March. Then Claudia Tilt again from Brussels. She checked into Hotel Scandia in Bergen from the 24th of April to the 1st of May. And then she sort of goes off the radar for a little bit. From May to October, she is not known if she checked into anywhere. However, on the 29th to the 30th of October, she checked in as Claudia Nilsson from Ghent, the K&A Hotelet in Stavanger. And then she was Alexia Zahn Marquez, checking in to Neptune Hotel in Bergen from the 30th of October to the 5th of November. Vera Jan from Antwerp, checking into the Hotel Bristol in Trondheim from the 6th to the 8th of November. Then she was Fenella Lorch in the St. Witham Hotel in Stavanger from the 9th to the 18th of November. Then she was Miss Leenhofer, which I think is a Dutch name, checking into Hotel Rosenkratz in Bergen from the 18th to 19th of November. And then finally she was Elizabeth Leenhofer, sorry, checking onto the Hotel Hordeheimen in Bergen. When she checked out of Hotel Hordeheimen, she asked them to order her a taxi. She paid for a bill, all in cash, and that was the last she was seen. That was on the 23rd of November, and her body was found on the 29th of November. Now, I think the autopsy showed that she hadn't been dead long when her body was found, so there is a little bit of time there where her actions would have been totally unaccounted for. whether it's just a couple of days or more than that. They just don't know where she was. Of course, back in 1970, technology was different in the hotels. Guests would have to check in by writing out their documents, and they managed to link this Isdal woman to all of these aliases used in these hotels purely by her handwriting. They compared all these documents from all these hotels. I can't even think about how long it would have taken them to do this. And even her handwriting provided clues as to who she was and where she was from. Handwriting experts said that it was most likely she was from France or maybe Belgium, just from the way she wrote and the accent she used on words. It was just a very sort of Western European way of writing. The police, of course, interviewed so many workers at these hotels, and the strongest impression that she left on someone was a 21-year-old waitress. This waitress said that the Isdal woman was elegant and self-assured. She was beautiful, she was fashionable. And the waitress said that she probably stared at this woman a little bit too much, because this woman actually ended up like winking at her just to let her know that she knew she was looking. And she said she was just so elegant, and she just was very intrigued by this woman. The waitress said this woman spent one night sitting next to two German Navy personnel, and they didn't say a word to each other all night, which was quite weird, because if you're sat next to somebody, even if you don't know them, you tend to, if you're a more confident person anyway, which this woman came across to be, you would think she would chat or like try and make conversation, but no, not a single word all night, which the waitress said just struck her as a little bit strange. Pretty much all of the people the police spoke to said the woman gave them the same impression of self-assuredness, confidence, elegance. She was very fashionable always. And they said that she spoke mostly English. It wasn't very strong English, it was quite broken in places, but it was English nonetheless. And she did sprinkle German phrases in here and there. Something I think I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the case and the suitcases the police found at the train station. In the case, they actually found this very strange coded note, and they spent so long trying to crack this code. It was just a weird combination of numbers and letters. It didn't mean anything to anyone. Eventually they cracked it, and it wasn't as exciting as they hoped it was going to be. It seemed to just be a record of where and when she was staying, which cooperated with all the records they had, like of comparing her handwriting, and it was just a lot less overwhelming than they thought it was going to be honest. But it was an interesting clue nonetheless. As I said before, the Isdal woman's official autopsy said that she had died from sleeping pill overdose and carbon monoxide poisoning. They also found smoke particles in her lungs that meant while she was burning, she's actually still alive. This would have been a crazy, crazy, painful death. And they also found a bruise on the right side of her neck, which she probably got while she was falling, or maybe she got it before her death, but they're not really sure about that. She had never been pregnant, never had any children. She'd been set alight with petrol, and they actually found 50 to about 70 sleeping pills in her stomach. So the sleeping pills hadn't been fully absorbed by the time she died. That was a lot of sleeping pills. And of course they actually said that in the end it was probably suicide. I would really like to be able to be like, no, there's no way this is suicide, but there was a lot of sleeping pills in her. So unless she was force-fed them, which is definitely a possibility, I think it's quite likely she took these herself, for reasons I'll get to in a little bit. The burning, however, is a little bit stranger. Now, obviously, it wasn't a case that she had died and somebody found her body and thought it would be fun to set her alight. She was alive while she was being burnt. So had she done this to herself? Was somebody else there while she was dying and had somebody else set her on fire? These are all very weird unanswered questions. I don't have the answer to for you, I'm afraid. A few months after she was found, and as the police investigation sort of dwindled away, she was buried. Now, she was buried in a Catholic funeral, which was unusual for Norway at the time. They weren't really Catholics up there at this time at all. I don't know if they are now, but they definitely weren't in the 1970s. So the fact that she was buried in a Catholic funeral obviously shows that the police thought that she was more from Europe, which was very Catholic at the time. She was buried in a zinc coffin so that she wouldn't decompose and the coffin wouldn't decompose, and they could revisit her body at a later point, which they actually ended up doing. Now, I don't know if they actually exhumed her body, but they definitely had a look at her teeth, her jaw, which had been preserved for all these years. With all this new forensic testing that's about nowadays, they did some new tests. They did oxygen isotope analysis and strontium isotope analysis. They're basically looking at the chemical signatures in the teeth. They'll be able to tell them where she was from, where she grew up. And the results were very, very interesting. It's crazy how good science is these days and the things that it can tell you about someone. So the testing on the teeth told scientists that the Isdal woman had probably grown up, had spent her early childhood in Eastern Europe, sort of the Soviet area. However, it showed that she most likely spent her teenage years, her sort of adolescent period, in Western Europe. The scientists said the results were more specific than they could have hoped for. It really zoned in a lot of areas in Western Europe quite specifically. I'm going to put up a map here which will show you the areas in which the woman grew up in. So as you can see, the earlier one shows a lot of concentration around Eastern Europe. The teenage one, however, shows that she maybe spent a lot of time around the English-Welsh border area or France-German border. It's even showing up a little bit in Spain, like northern Spain. And these are quite specific, although these areas obviously are quite big in themselves. To be able to pinpoint specific areas that this woman spent her time is a massive breakthrough in the case, and scientists really think they are getting to the nub of who she is. They think they're going to be able to get her identity quite soon. They've now been able to form an extended DNA profile, which they've sent to Interpol. Interpol are going to run it against all of their system. Obviously it takes a long time to run DNA against everyone they've got. They've also sent the DNA to specific police forces across Europe, and they're hoping that maybe they might get a match, whether it's a blood relative or I would say children, but it says she didn't have any children, but they might be able to get a match, even a loose one. So really, in terms of theories as to who she was, there aren't any. Like, they don't know who she is. She could be anyone from across Europe. I even think she could go as far as like South Africa, like maybe America. She didn't have an English accent, which makes me think maybe she wasn't from the English-Welsh border like I mentioned a minute ago. But they're really being able to zone in on who she is. Why she was doing what she was doing, however, is something I do have a couple of theories for. One theory is that she was on the run, whether she was on the run from maybe a crime ring or abusive family. She was just running from something, which could explain why she was checking into hotels under different names. However, one thing that doesn't quite sit right with me in the running away theory is that everyone who had come across her said that she was so cool and collected and elegant. Everyone just said there was this air around her which was so confident, which doesn't strike me as someone who was scared and running, but maybe she was just a very cool collected runner. And her death could be that she got tired of running and then decided to kill herself, which again doesn't explain the burns on the face, or maybe whoever she was running from finally caught up with her. The other theory, which I think is the most popular one in this case, is that she was a spy, and I think this is most likely. This was 1970, this is the midst of the Cold War era. If she was from the Soviet Union, from Eastern Europe like I said, there's a good chance she could have been a Russian or Soviet spy, which would explain the bad dental works. Obviously dental care in the Soviet Union, healthcare in general, was poor, very very poor. This woman made trips to the big cities in Norway around the time that there were military rocket tests being done very close to these cities. It would explain why she had all of these different aliases, why she was so cool, so collected. A lot of spies were very, well, all spies I suppose, are very highly trained in what they do. Now if she was on the run, like I mentioned before, were real passports, stolen passports, and was she just sort of picked up along the way, which wouldn't really make too much sense because then the police would have been able to like trace back to the original owners, but I don't really know how that would have worked in the 1970s. However, if she was a spy, these would have been good forgeries. But it is actually quite interesting to note that none of these forged passports have ever been found. So maybe this woman was a spy and was just a very good liar. She's going into a hotel, maybe she's flustered and pretending to be upset, and the clerk at the check-in desk takes pity on her and just says, no, you don't need to use a passport, just write your name down. And there's a very big possibility that is how it happened, and there were never any fake passports to begin with. And this could also explain her very strange death. Maybe she had done what she had to do, and maybe she was scared of being caught and so knew it was time to kill herself for her suicide. So she took the sleeping pills, which were actually very fast acting sleeping pills, but she knew she couldn't be identified as she was a spy, and it maybe would have got her country into a lot of trouble, which is why she burnt her face so she would be unrecognisable and her identity would never be found. And it seems to have worked. So it's been a lot of years, 46 years, nearly 47 years to be exact, since this happened, and she has never been identified. Now I haven't been able to cover everything in this video. There are a lot more interesting points in this, but if I went on I would be talking forever, so I'm going to link all of my sources down below. If you're interested at all, please go read them. It is so interesting. Also, don't shout at me if I miss things out, because I know I have missed a few things out, but there's only so much a girl can say, you know. But this is a crazy interesting one. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed researching it. As always, anything that you want to see, put it down below. Any interesting cases, I do add them all to a list. I'm like slowly working through them. There's just like, I've got a lot. There's a lot, okay? But yeah, if you like this, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. It is really helpful to me to know what sort of videos you guys like by how many thumbs up I'm getting on them. YouTubers don't just say it for no reason. It's actually really helpful to see what people are and aren't enjoying. And of course, make sure you subscribe because I am so close to 30,000 subscribers. So close. I'm hoping by next week's Midweek Mystery I might hit it, maybe. Let's see. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.